Okay, hey everyone. In this video, I want to try something I've never done before, and that is cast something in epoxy resin. So what I want to cast first, I'm an engineer, right? So I'm kind of a dork or whatever, but I want to cast an Arduino in epoxy resin and make, I guess, sort of like a paperweight maybe kind of thing, a paperweight or I don't know, some little tchotchke. So to do that, what I first need to do is find a mold for my resin. And I looked all over online and I couldn't find one, so I decided it might be fun to also make my own silicone mold. So I got stuff to do that also. Um, and what I'm going to use as a mold form is this acrylic uh, box top. So this is like a little card game, and this is like a little acrylic lid, and it's nice and square. It's real like clean, and you can see it's like kind of hollow in the middle. It's kind of like a dish. So I'm going to use this portion of it to create a square, kind of rectangular prism mold. So to do that, I have this craft paper or craft like board, that kind of like foam board. And so what I'm going to do is I want basically a 1/2 inch around. So what I'm going to do is I got some hot glue going here. Just going to glue this on. I'm just kind of messily doing this. This is the outside of the mold, so it doesn't really matter. It just has to be strong enough that silicone won't leak out, and uh, that's basically it. And it doesn't fall apart while you're making the mold. Okay, so if I got some on there. So if I drop this in, let's see, use something to kind of maneuver it. That looks pretty good. So I have maybe one side is larger than the other. It's about 1/4 to 3/8 inch gap. So I think it's a little bit better all the way around. You can kind of see that. This, again, this part doesn't have to be precise. What I don't want is the mold to be all the way against one side like that because, oh yeah, my mold's definitely not square either. Because then the silicone won't fill in around the edges. We'll see. I'm not sure how thick the silicone is. I may have already, it may be, we may have trouble getting the silicone all the way down in the gaps there. But I don't want my part all the way on one side, and I don't want it so thick that it's hard for me to get the mold and silicone and everything out. So I think this is probably pretty good. One thing I am worried about is because this is hollow, when I pour the silicone on, there's going to be quite a buoyant force trying to pull this cube up to the top. So what I'm actually going to do is glue the cube to the bottom of this. That's going to be kind of tricky, but I'll do my best because I'm going to have to glue it all at once. I probably should have glued the cube down first. That would have been smart, but I didn't do that, so it's fine. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to mark real quick, like basically where I want to fill the mold to. So I'm just making a little mark here just for me to remember, and I'm just eyeballing it so that when I actually go to fill this with silicone, here, that's a better camera for this. When I go to fill this with silicone, I'm going to fill it to that mark, and then I know that gives me enough clearance so the bottom of my mold is going to be thick enough. So I'm going to try this. We're going to see what happens here. I'm just going to try to just stick it on there real quick, kind of drop it and position it. Okay, that wasn't awesome, but it wasn't terrible either. So I had that best and just kind of drop it. So let's see, it should be fairly well in there now. I think that'll keep it at least from floating up. You can see it's not perfectly square in there. Like one side it's a little crooked, and one side's definitely closer to the wall than the other, but that shouldn't matter. So okay, so now, probably should have done this before, but I need to make sure this is all really clean because, again, I don't want to have to post-process my casting when I actually go to fill this with resin. So I don't want any of those little strings in there from the hot glue gun. I want to make sure that it's as clean and neat as possible. And I think now it's time to probably mix and pour the silicone. So here's what I've got, this mold making BB Dino. I don't know what that I don't know if that's a brand that everyone knows or what, but this is a 2-part silicone. So what I'm supposed to do is mix these in equal parts. And I'm actually going to pause right now to figure out more or less how much silicone by volume I need. So, okay, so I just did the quick math here. Uh, all I did was calculate the volume of the big cube, my mold space, the volume of my casting, that's going to be my negative here, and I just subtracted the two. I did that in inches, so then I had to convert cubic inches to milliliters, because that's what I have on my cup. And I came up with 350 milliliters. It's a 2-part system, so that's 175 milliliters each. If I pour 175 milliliters of each part A and B in here, mix it all up, that should give us enough volume. And I kind of fudged in some extra there, so we should have enough for our mold casting. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's see here. I don't know if you need to, I don't think you need to shake this. I didn't say that in the instructions. So I'm going to get very precise about this, as precise as I can. My marks go between 170 and 190, so I'm going to have to kind of guess a little bit on this, which is fine. I think as long as I'm as close as I can get and I mix it thoroughly, it shouldn't matter too much. So I'm looking very carefully here. This is boring but necessary. So that's 170 plus a quarter of the way between 170 and 190, about. That should give me basically what I need. Almost. All right, that should be about 175 milliliters. So I'm going to put the top back on this. This is looking about right. If I kind of compare the cup, I'm about halfway there. So this guy goes all the way to 350 milliliters. So this one I can be a lot quicker with, because I have a nice line for 350. I can just stop right at that line. Slow down at the end, let it kind of flatten out, let the meniscus catch up. It was kind of like domed looking, and that is 350. Okay. This silicone is supposed to degas itself. So it says you can stir vigorously and introduce as many bubbles as you want. I'm still going to try not to do that. But it says I should stir this for 3.5 minutes minimum. Okay, so I've got this mixed. I've been mixing for almost 6 minutes now, actually. I said I was only going to do 5, but I want to make sure it's extra mixed. So the last thing I'm going to do is spray this mold release onto here. So I'm just going to kind of put this over here, make sure it's supposed to be kind of like a fog. Oh, it smells actually kind of nice, almost lemony, citrusy. So I don't think you need or want a lot of it, because you don't want the texture of the spray to show up in your mold. So I'm going to just let this degas a little bit. So I'm going to take this stick. I might use that later, but I want to get all the silicone off of it for now. Set that aside. So remember, the top of this mold is going to be the bottom of my casting. I care way less about the bottom of this mold than I do the top. So I'm gonna be careful to pour around, and I want to make sure the top has a very nice even layer, and I don't introduce any air bubbles or anything in there, because that's the part that I care about. So I'm gonna just kind of pour this on the side, and I'm actually gonna put some cardboard under me here, because I'm not 100% confident that this mold is gonna not leak. So just to make sure, I don't want it leaking all over my table. Oops, and I put my hand on the silicone there. That's fine. I'm going to slowly pour this silicone down. Let's see if I can get you a view of that, so that it fills the entire bottom of the mold. Yep, you can see it kind of flooding through there. So this side of my mold is definitely leaking. I'm going to grab some tape. I'm going to let this cure. should take, I mean, I'm going to leave it overnight, and then by tomorrow, by the time I get back to this, I should be able to pull the part out and see what we got. All right, so we're back here again. You may be looking at this now. This is the next day. This is 2.5 days later now. I actually didn't get to it yesterday, so I didn't have time, but you may be thinking this looks a little different. That's because within minutes of me cleaning up and starting to put this aside, I realized I did not do a good job sealing this at all, and I was leaking all over the place. So I made a nice blanket of tape and sealed it all up, and then within about a couple hours, it had turned, kind of hard enough. So I'm gonna open this up. Let's get the camera to focus a little better. There we go. And yeah, it's popping right out. So looking at this, I'll try to get a side view here with my phone camera. Let's do that real quick. All right. So you can see the quality is actually quite good. It's a little bubbly on the texture here. I think that's from, if you look close, if I can get the right angle, I think that's from the mold release actually. So that may be something I do need to end up sanding and buffing out. I can't feel that, you can see that texture. Let's get the focus. You can see it. I can't feel anything there. So by the time we go to pour epoxy in it, it may not show up at all. But we'll see. So if I put this in here, remember this is ultimately what I want to cast. That is basically what it'll look like. Move it down a little bit. That's basically what I'm going to cast in. So yeah, I think I'm happy with how this turned out. I'll upload the next video and actually do that casting.